This video is a walkthrough on accepting your JMU Student Financial Aid. Once awarded, a student is sent an email notification to their JMU email. To view and accept your aid, you will need to log in to your MyMadison account. Once you are signed in, you will select the Student tab, then select the Student Center link. Once you are within the Student Center page, you will need to scroll to the Finances section. To accept or decline your aid, select Accept/Decline Awards. If this is your first time accepting aid for this academic year, first need to complete the questionnaire that follows before you are able to accept your aid. The first part of the questionnaire will ask about any outside scholarships you have received or will receive. Place the official scholarship name and the amount dedicated to each semester within the table. Do not list any JMU scholarships or outside scholarships placed on the supplemental scholarship sheet here. The following question requires you to indicate whether you will be an undergraduate or a graduate student. From there, you will need to select the option to participate in electronic transactions. This allows our office to communicate with you electronically as well as move money electronically. Finally, check the box explaining that you understand that your financial aid is divided evenly in half between the fall and spring semesters. To unevenly split the loans, you will need to submit a loan change request form found on the financial aid website in the Forms section. Once the questionnaire is complete, click Submit. On the following page, select the aid year for which you are accepting financial aid. To choose the proper aid year, you will need to select the calendar year tied to the spring semester. For example, the academic year that includes summer 2025, fall 2025, and spring 2026, you would choose the aid year 2026. The next page is your aid package. The table on this page displays all the financial aid offered for the academic year. It includes the category of the aid, the amount offered, and the amount accepted. To view a more detailed description of each aid type, you may click on the corresponding links. Some aid offered cannot be accepted through MyMadison. However, you are still able to read details on the award or decline it if you would like. To decline, select the checkbox in the Decline column. To accept an offer, select the checkbox in the Accept column. You may accept the offered amount or enter a lesser amount in the accepted box. Federal work-study options and Parent Plus loans cannot be accepted through a student's MyMadison account. To accept work-study, a student would need to be hired for a position. If a student wishes to decline the work-study option, the Parent Plus eligibility would increase by the declined amount. The Parent Plus loan option is accepted once an approved Parent Plus loan application is processed. After everything is accepted or declined, click the Submit button on the bottom of the page. Select Yes to confirm. If this is your first time borrowing any federal student loans, you will be prompted to complete entrance counseling and a master promissory note, often referred as an MPN. The federal government requires both before any student loans are dispersed. These items can be completed by going to studentaid.gov and logging in with the student's FSA ID and password. Once you click the OK button at the bottom of the page, you will be directed back to the aid package page. The status shows anything accepted by having check marks in the Accept column. You can change your Accept/Decline choice and resubmit unless the line is grayed out, meaning our office has already processed your aid or it is not eligible for change through MyMadison. Once your aid is accepted, our office will process it as quickly as possible. If you are missing any information, our office will communicate via your JMU email. If you have any additional questions about accepting your aid, please contact our office.